Hello everyone, welcome to another lab. In this lab, we are going to create virtual hard disk. If you are following the series of this lab, in the previous lab, we already talked about the virtualization, which is not only the operating system virtualized, but the hardware can also virtualize. That is the good understanding of how the virtualization is work, and that's what we're actually practicing in this lab. Here is the scenario. You have installed Hyper-V on IT admin. You want to create two new virtual machines on which you will later install Windows 11. This new virtual machine will be used for testing, which is mostly the main reason of using the virtual machine. It's not only to run the application, but mostly virtual machine is used to test what's going on with the application. In this lab, your task is to create the new virtual machine, which with the following specification. Also create the new virtual machine, which is the second one. The first one is one, and the second one. And finally, you have to configure the minimum and maximum RAM value of V2. So let's start with the first one. So how we can able to get, since we are already in IT admin, the first thing we have to do is look for is what already mentioned in here, Hyper-V. So you just type Hyper-V in the search bar, which is already installed somewhere. So once you type in here, so you see like this is Hyper-V Manager. So you just open that. Then inside here, so that's where you need to create the other one. So you have to click on, if you click on this one, maybe you cannot able to really see the connect the server or view something, customize something like that. So you have to make sure you are click on computer that you want to create the virtual machine on, and then you can see the option that say new up here. So you have to click on that, and then what we want to create here is the first thing, the virtual machine. So we have to create the virtual machine here. So the first part is before you begin. So there's like different information that have been given here. So the wizard help you to create the virtual machine. You can use the virtual machine place of physical computer to variety of use, as we already said. But to create the virtual machine, do one of the following. Either you just click finish to create the virtual machine that is configured with default values, or click the next to create virtual machine with the custom configuration. I think since we already have this information that already given to us, we have to click next instead of saying finish, which going to be created with the default information. So we need this part. So the first thing that we have to give is virtual machine, which is VM1. And the second one is the virtual machine location. Is there any mention about the virtual machine location? It's right here. So the location is D Hyper-V that. So which is already selected, store the virtual machine in different location. I think we don't really have to do the maybe just remove that because it's a Hyper-V, so there's no slash. But I think that is not really big problem. If you plan to check point of this virtual machine, select the location that enough free space. That's what you have to make sure. So, uh, but again, I think what we already have up here that is enough. So that's just what we need. So we don't really have to select anywhere else. So all right, then after that, you have to hit next. Is still don't click finish because there is this specification like generation, this generation one, because you can read it, what the difference between generation one and two. This virtual machine generates support 32-bit and 64-bit guest operating system. If you don't know what the difference between 32 and 34, please take your time and do the research about that too. But that is the first option. The second option is actually more the newer version of the Windows, which is this operation provide the newer version of feature has UEFI based firmware and require the support 64-bit guest operating system. So 32, it doesn't support UEFI, which is related to the TP200. So that's why if we really want to do the other one, we gonna go with this one. But for now, we just go with virtual one, generation one. All right, next still, so we have to start up memory is already specified up here. Instead of just 512, we have to make 1024, right? So then do not use dynamic memory. So that is another concept. Dynamic memory for this virtualization is when you want to use the memories change as it needed instead of using the specific number like this, which is never going to be changed. But there's good thing and bad thing about that. So the good thing is if you use the dynamic, it going to be, it only use the memory that the computer need by that time. So sometimes it go up, sometimes it go down. So like the bad thing is if you really need this virtual machine is running powerful application and use enough memory all the time. But if that memory is already using by another applications, this computer cannot able to get enough memory because the memory is already allocated for different resource. So because of that, if you use the dynamic, maybe sometime you really hit the uh, neck battle. So like you have to make sure you are using the right memory option. All right, moving on. So next, and then the connection, network connection is external. So we have to choose that. So you can decide what type of your network connection. Is that internal or is that default switch or is that private or external? So we say external for this one. And then keep moving. So as you see here, virtual hard disk name is VM1.VHDX. So that is already selected. So we don't really have to change anything there. But the only thing that we need to change here, also the location, virtual hard disk location is Hyper-V. That's something you have to make sure. Virtual hard disk. So that is something we need. So we don't have to change anything. But this one, you have to make sure it's only 50 gigabyte. Operating system will be installed later. So you just choose that, use the existing virtual hard disk if we don't want to use this, or which means if you don't want to create the virtual machine hard disk, you can use another option. But since we want to create the new one, as it's already mentioned inside here or at the beginning, that's what we really want to do. So we have to keep that option. And then next. So as it already mentioned, virtual hard disk size is that and operating system will be installed later. So we don't have to do anything. So install operating system later, that's the option we choose. If you want to install right now, so you have to select this one and make sure you get the right image from the right place. So that's something. I think after that, very much. We just read the summary, what we want to create, and then hit finish. So as you see here, VM1 is right here, but the status is off, which means we are not running or we are not doing anything. So the second step is to do the same thing what we already did, but the only difference is the name, the size, and different version. So we're gonna do the same thing. Go here, create the virtual machine, and go next and VM2. That's what we need to do. And then next, again, we have to still select generation 1 because if we go with generation 2, that's different story. All right. So for startup memory, so that's something that also we need to change, which is 2048 gigabyte. Again, we move on. Okay, for this one, we are going to use dynamic memory. So as I already said, when you decide how much the memory assigned virtual machine, consider how you intend to use virtual machine operating system that will run. So either you want to dynamic or kind of static. So for this one, we use dynamic. All right, the connection type for this virtual machine is internal. So this is not for external purpose. This is just for internal. All right, as you see, the name is already matched and the location is also matched, and the size will be need to change. Okay, so that is something we have to change, and also we need to create the disk. We don't really have to change anything. The operating system will be installed later. That is when we move to the next page. That's what's going to be happening here. All right, as you see, we get all the information that's the summarize, and we just say finish. Same thing, we have VM2, which is conclude that. So as we conclude the first two virtual machines, still we are left with another work, which is say configure the minimum and the maximum RAM value for VM2. All right. So how we can able to do that? So we have to come here, and then when you select on that, as you can see on the right side, there's different options that you can able to go through and then manage whatever you want to do. So let's start with setting. Can we able to change anything in the setting? I think so. If we click on memory, so you can able to see the maximum RAM and the minimum RAM and the maximum RAM. So the minimum, instead of 2048, it should be like 515. Again, since we already select this to enable dynamic, so we have to specify this is the minimum, this is the maximum, because it can go up as it needed, depending on how many resource this machine need. So we have to decide how much it's kind of able to go. So as you see, this is a lot of number. So we don't need all that resources actually consumed by this single device. Because of that, we have to create that limitation, the minimum and the maximum. So we have to apply that and then say, okay. So maybe if you go back there and then you can able to see what's going on. To create a new virtual machine, start the Hyper-V and right-click admin, then new. So that's just what we already did. To configure RAM, click right, the virtual machine, then select setting. That is another way too. So if you just right-click and you can able to find the setting right here. Or the same way it's already in right side, you just click on it and then you can get from there. All right, so as we do all the time, since we come to the last point, so let's score the lab and see what the answer look like. All right, as you all see, we successfully scored 100%. That concludes this lab. Thank you for watching. See you in next lab.